Welcome back to my channel, guys. If you've been tuning in to my last few videos, I've been trying different content themes and I created a few interview videos where I interviewed gay men who fascinate me. And this started with a list that I made a few months ago of about 50 men, gay men, who I would love to interview for my channel. Gay men who fascinate me. This list included adult stars, authors, YouTubers, influencers, but there was one man at the top of the list that I thought, if I can get this guy, and I knew it was a reach. But he was my number one dream guest. And you guessed it, it was Joel Simkhai. I hope I'm saying that right. The Israeli-American tech entrepreneur who founded Grindr. By the way, it is not a coincidence. I am wearing this shirt today in honor of Grindr. It was the closest color, I guess we can call this marigold. It was the closest color I could find in my limited wardrobe that went with the brand color scheme of Grindr. By the way, speaking of color motifs and color schemes, I think this is the first video of mine with my new Art Basel painting that I waited multiple months to ship from Amsterdam in the Netherlands. I love it. I don't know what you guys think about it, but I am obsessed. It's called tape art. So there actually isn't any paint on here. This artist uses tape on the outside of a box. This is actually a wine box, like a wine crate. And he sticks a light inside. And that's why there's this like cool glow. It doesn't have quite its full effect right now because it's daytime, but it glows and it's really pretty at night the way the light shines through this box. Anyway, that's just a background thing. Back to Grindr. So I made this list, right, of gay men who fascinate me, who I would love to interview. And Joel Simkhai, the founder of Grindr, the original CEO of Grindr, was at the top of the list. Spoiler alert, I didn't get the interview. But let me tell you this crazy story, and I'm sure some of you won't even believe me, but this to me felt like a serendipitous sign. Okay, so 2 days after I created that list, right, I'm on Grindr, and who views my profile but Joel Simkhai? I knew it was him. I knew what he looked like. He has a very distinct face. And I thought, wait, is this like the universe playing a trick on me? There's no way that this guy, who I just wrote his name down on a piece of paper a few days ago, there's no way that he just viewed my profile. So I reach out to him because I'm like, if this isn't a sign from baby Jesus himself, I don't know what is. I reach out to him and I'm like, hey, are you who I think you are? And he's like, who do you think I am? Like, do we know each other? Who are you? And so I gave him the pitch. I was like, hey, listen, I have this YouTube channel. It's all about gay stories, gay themes. Here are some channel stats. Look at how the vast majority of my audience is made up of not just gay men, but gay male millennials who probably either have used Grindr or have an opinion about it. I would love to interview you. What do you think about it? There would be no spin of any kind. I want this to be an open conversation. If you have anything you want to get across to people, to an audience of gay men, this will be your opportunity. So I tried to pitch it to him like, you know, there's value for you to do this. It's not just me getting something out of it. You can set the record straight. You can promote any projects. Turns out he's since launched a new app, Motto, which I'll talk about later in this video. But I really tried to sell it to him like, come on, let's do this. He did not respond. I followed up the next time I hit a milestone with my channel in terms of number of subscribers reached, still didn't respond to me. And then I thought I'll try one more time. That third attempt, right? Third time's the charm. Otherwise, I'm just gonna let this go. I don't want him to think I'm like a total creeper. And he got back to me saying he doesn't really do interviews anymore. Now, I appreciated that he at least responded to me. He didn't have to do that, right? I was bummed, but I thought, don't let this kill your spirit. Keep going with this idea, this vision of creating content around interviews. I then snagged my first few interviews, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen at this point if you're subscribed to my channel, and if you're not subscribed, you should subscribe. But I thought, you know what? I'll just have a conversation with myself about Joel Simkhai, and I'm sure my audience will appreciate it because I've made many videos on this channel about Grindr stories, Grindr escapades. Some of my most viewed videos, like out of my 10 most viewed videos, I want to say 2 or 3 of them are about Grindr. So I'm assuming that if I find this interesting, hopefully you guys will find this interesting. By the way, the more I kept digging, the more I found this guy and just the history of Grindr fascinating. So let's get into it. So Joel is an Israeli-American tech entrepreneur. So he was born in Tel Aviv, Israel, moved to the States, to New York City with his family as a kid. Classic sort of immigrant story, right? They have to figure things out. They move to the city. The reason I think it's interesting that he's Israeli, and some of you might know this, some of you might not, there's a huge tech scene in Israel. Like Israelis are known for running, one of the things they're known for is the tech startup scene. So Joel really comes from a long line, not his family, but just culturally, a long line of Israeli tech entrepreneurs. It's a thing. I have worked for an Israeli company myself in the past. It's a thing. And just to tell you a little bit about Israelis, the way they function is like the stereotype is that Israelis can be kind of cutthroat, they cut to the chase, very direct. One thing that Israelis do really well is business. It's still cutthroat, again, speaking from experience, but they're very technical and savvy and strategic with business. And the reason I mention this is when I start talking about how Grindr came to be, some of the articles that I read about Joel Simkhai, I really like some of the things that he said, and you see that he was like born to do it kind of thing. So as I mentioned, Joel moves with his family as a kid from Israel to New York City in the United States. He grows up, but he's not out throughout his childhood. And like many others, it's during college that he experiments, realizes what's going on, okay, I'm gay kind of thing. And it's not until after college that he comes out to his family. By the way, after college, he was working in mergers and acquisitions, which if you're not familiar with that, it's basically in the finance world, the part of the finance world that deals with ownership of companies, like buying, selling companies. So the stereotype with mergers and acquisitions is that it's very cutthroat, but it's also incredibly lucrative. There's a lot of money in it, and it's kind of like your classic finance job. So Joel is working away like so many other yuppies, right? Young urban professionals in the city. And then in 2009, he develops Grindr. Now, he doesn't think this is going to be like a global phenomenon by any means. He's just trying to solve a simple problem through an app. According to Wikipedia, and I am reading off my computer, his original goal in starting Grindr was for people with similar interests to find new friends nearby. Okay, sir. I have my doubts about that. When is the last time that somebody joined Grindr to make friends? But I digress. I did read in a separate article that his goal with Grindr was that he wanted to make it easier for gay men to find each other. That is more believable to me. And if you think about it, that's such a simple business model, right? Let's create an app to make it easier for gay guys to connect. Boom. And so this is where I find Joel really interesting as a business person and as a founder. His whole thing is that in the beginning, there was very little budget for Grindr. He had very limited experience or knowledge about technology. But here was this simple sort of dilemma that he wanted to fix through having this app. He also says, and this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs will say, and accurately so, that a ton of people have told him they had the idea for Grindr long before he did, that they tried to develop their own app. But his whole thing is like, yeah, that's all great. You could say that about a million inventions. At the end of the day, it's about execution. A lot of people have ideas, but who's actually like going to the market, developing an idea and tweaking along the way based on feedback from users? And so that was the whole strategy. They went to market as soon as possible in 2009 and tried to just collect feedback as much as possible to make it, again, fix this simple problem of how do we connect gay people, but on a mass scale. By the way, if you've never used Grindr, here's the elevator pitch, the 20-second elevator pitch. Basically, it's a GPS-based hookup or dating app. So if you're using the regular free version, you see the closest 100 profiles around you. If you add filters like only certain ages, only certain heights, I don't know, only tops, only bottoms, whatever. And of course, some of those filters come with a cost. You need to get a premium account, right? That's how they get you. But of course, all of this has created a very hookup-oriented app, because if you're talking to guys 300 feet away, it activates this sort of primal instinct, right? Versus, let's say, a Tinder or a Bumble or a Hinge, where you have to make more effort, right? Both people have to match, they have to swipe first, match, and then they can talk. But Grindr is this like direct solution to get what you want, which again, culturally speaking, as somebody who's worked for an Israeli company and met a lot of Israelis, it's such an Israeli thing to be like, let's cut to the chase. And I just find it fascinating that the app in that sense mirrors the founder, an Israeli gay man. So of course, the rest is history. Grindr absolutely blows up. Several years later, there's over 2 million daily users on the app in about 200 different countries. And Joel is the first person to admit that he had no idea the app would take off the way that it did. Again, he was just trying to solve a simple problem, as many startups attempt to do, and then it really just exploded. I never thought it would turn into something global, and I never thought of it as a way to make a living. It was just that as a gay man, you always want to know who else around you is gay. As of September 2023, Grindr has over 13 million monthly active users. So naturally, when an app has this much traffic, right, and the value of the app increases, right, it starts changing hands. So in 2016, this Chinese gaming company called Kunlun Tech, I hope I'm saying that right, they end up buying a huge piece of Grindr, a 60% stake. And then eventually in 2018, they buy out the rest of Grindr, which essentially marks Joel Simkhai's exit from Grindr in 2018. Allegedly, he walked away from Grindr with hundreds of millions of dollars after selling, his final stake in the company. In May of 2022, Grindr ended up going public. So you can publicly trade Grindr stocks now. I actually own some. I believe long-term it's a good investment, but I bought at the worst time and it hasn't increased in value since then. But that's a whole other story. I think Grindr is here to stay. Let's just leave it at that. So Grindr, as we all know, has this controversial, polarizing reputation, right? Every gay person has an opinion on Grindr, even if they've never used it. So what does Joel Simkhai think about all this, right? And this is why I wanted to interview him, by the way. I wanted to have a conversation with him about, like, in retrospect, what are your thoughts about what you created? Do you feel you created an amazing tool? Do you feel you created a monster? Turns out, he does think he created a monster. I created Grindr, so I guess I'm responsible for what happens on Grindr to some extent. Under my watch, there were negative things. I've got to say that a lot of these negative things have kind of sat with me in a bad way, kind of sat on my conscience. I think he meant conscience, not conscious. At first, Grindr really didn't modify what you stated in your profile. We still had kind of a laissez-faire approach, a hands-off approach on how do we work, how people interact with each other, how the community would interact, and kind of my view was let the community manage itself. Who am I to tell anyone how to behave? By the way, I totally get that perspective. Like, it's a fine line between free speech and letting the market kind of do its thing, and then the other end of micromanaging users. You can't say this, you can't promote that in your bio. And this is something that a lot of platforms struggle with, by the way. I mean, you have to remember too, 2009 is way before all this body positivity stuff and all-inclusive, marketing campaigns that we now see everywhere. At Grindr, I was obviously aware of these issues, and it was tough to solve for a number of reasons. Leaving Grindr and having a chance to think about these things, I thought, what do I want my legacy to be? So in 2022, Joel Simkhai launches a new gay dating app called Motto. So of course, putting my journalist hat on, you have to then take what he's saying with a grain of salt, right? Because suddenly you're like, okay, is it 100%, that you feel a little bit guilty about the legacy of Grindr? Or are you using that sort of conversation topic in this more woke era to promote this new app? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, and he's clearly savvy enough and smart enough to know that the market has really changed, the public conversations, the public narrative, all that has really changed around, again, body positivity, inclusion of all types of people, and so on, right? We live in a different world. So I, of course, looked into Motto, but it's actually still really limited. At the time that I checked, back when I first messaged him on Grindr, Motto was only available in New York City. If any of you know anything about the app, if any of you have ever used it, would love to hear your feedback. Please share in the comments. So the whole idea with this Motto app, according to Joel Simkhai, is of course, to try to get lightning to strike twice, right? He had this success with Grindr. Now this is supposed to be the new iteration of that. But the idea is this app wouldn't have the same sort of bitter taste that a lot of people have been left with Grindr. The negative sort of after effect that people associate with Grindr. So one way to do that, for example, is that on this Motto app, you can't have a headless torso picture. Your profile picture has to be a face photo, right? Which of course makes it very different from Grindr, if you've ever used Grindr. So one fascinating thing about Joel that I read online that I was shocked by is that Joel is not the only gay one in the family. He is one of 3 boys, and every single one of the boys of the sons is gay. So even though he struggled with his coming out journey, as many do, right? He says that it actually wasn't as bad as it would be, in most dynamics, in most families, because all 3 brothers are gay. Think about that for a second. The man who invented a groundbreaking app for gay men not only is gay himself, but all of his siblings are gay. I don't know that I've ever heard of that. I've heard of people having a gay twin, like both twins are gay, or both siblings are gay, like they have, there's 2 gay kids in the family, but 3 out of 3? What a crazy story. As always, I'm so curious to hear what you guys think about this, what your takeaways are from this story of Joel Simkhai and the history of Grindr. I hope you found it as fascinating and as riveting as I have. Let me know in the comments what you think, and catch you next time.